Decision fatigue is something that has plagued me for quite a while, and I think is like one of the hardest things to deal with. On a fundamental level, it's like, well, you have all these things in front of you and you just don't know where to begin. Um, and this can also be like analysis paralysis for a lot of people. And that thing is really difficult to conquer. So I wrote some notes to myself and I did a little bit of journaling, and I kind of want to break down what exactly I found. Um, just because having all the freedom in the world is something that I feel like I have much more now. And it's not necessarily what serves me the best at this stage of my life, but rather just the ability to choose what exactly I want. So there were some notes that I took that I think, you know, is going to be really useful. Um, but this is the first one. When you notice that you're like in this dilemma where you're not starting something because, well, you just don't know the right business model, or you don't know the right outreach, or you're just like doing anything to avoid the action itself, um, this avoidance mechanism can be greatly suppressed if you treat it as an experiment. So I actually got this from Ali Abdaal. I got a lot of these points from one of his great videos, which I'll link in the description. But one of the things that he talks about there is treat everything as an experiment. So if you're going to send some cold emails and try and make them like an experiment. Like, what happens if I send out these cold emails, you know? And how is it going to respond? How do I create it? Treat it as an experiment, right? Because really all it is an experiment. It's like you're experimenting to see what happens if I send out these cold emails. What happens if I do outreach this way? Um, the experiment is seeing like what the business would want or what they would benefit from using. Can I create a solution that helps them with this? And, lastly is like, can I try and sell the solution to the business? If you treat it as experiments, then it just becomes so much easier to like conceptualize as something worth doing, because you're not like fully committing to it. Is what you tell yourself pretty much. You pretty much tell yourself that you're not fully committing to it, but it's like the stakes are way lower. It's just an experiment. It's like you're going to find out what happens. And, if it works out, then it does. And if it doesn't, then it doesn't. But it's like in the modern age, there is not much that you can actually be losing. Um, like your stakes are not really high. You're not going to die if the business doesn't take forward. You're not going to like, lose a limb and, like just like it's not that bad. Sometimes the monsters live in our head, um, but they don't exist outside of our head. So Alex Ramosi has this really great saying, which is like, fear is a mile wide and an inch deep, and also that fear only exists in the vague. Once you put it into the specifics, it begins to really just like fall apart. Um, which basically just means like break down your fear. What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of having happen? It's like, all right, I post this video and it tanks, right? It tanks. Like no one watches it, or it gets really negative reviews. And then what? Like it doesn't actually matter that much. And I was watching this podcast of Naval today. Another avoidance mechanism, but there was something really good in it, which was like, you're gonna die. And Alex Hormozy talks about this a lot, but it's like, you're gonna die, and it's not going to really matter. You have had a set of sensory experiences and you will interpret them either or, but it's like you're not taking anything with you. You might as well just enjoy what you're doing and, treat it as an experiment. Like, go have fun, like, take it out for a joyride. So, yeah. Yeah, that's going to be a big one. Experiments. Also, there's expected value. So I'll link the video because a lot of these concepts are from there. But yeah, there's magnitudes of good and magnitudes of bad. And basically, Ali Abdaal states that the expected value in his mind is magnitude of good or bad times the probability of good or bad happening. So basically, we'll continue with the business thing because it's very relevant in my life, at least. Um, but it's like if I were to send a cold email asking someone to get coffee, and I'm running this experiment. Like, what happens if I send cold emails to see if I can get people to, go and get some coffee and pick their brain? If I run the experiment and nothing happens, then, you know, the expected value of it was honestly not that bad. I got to learn how to write cold emails, and I got way more experience like sending them. Um, and if they don't respond, then it's like the expected value is not that bad. I mean, they don't respond. It's like doesn't affect me in any way. But if the expected value was I sent the cold email and then they did respond, then that's like really positive, really good expected value because it's like now I got my desired outcome. A lot of things in life, really extracted all the way, are win-win situations. There are very few things that you can do that will lead you to like complete ruin. And those obviously probably should be avoided or thought a little bit longer about. But it's like the majority of things that you have in this modern age, you can see them as win-wins in most circumstances. It's like, okay, let me send the email and, they might just respond and be like unsubscribe. And I've had that happen and it's like it's just so funny. Um it's like, all right, it's like there's nothing wrong there. Yeah. Which another thing is like fear again only exists in the vague. So fear as the compass. There is something that's really, really interesting. You should be optimizing for short-term pain and long-term gain. I think Naval said that. And I think it's really true. So I will say it like this. Your brain will try and put off feeling pain now, right? So I'll try and put it off for as long as possible. But all this does is just like make the pain amplified way more in the future and you'll still have to deal with it. So you might as well just optimize for short-term pain and long-term gain. So here's a example of that I think through because I'm really into fitness and, it's something that I enjoy. But so when I started working out, I would avoid the weight section at any cost. I was like, I'm not going into the weight section. Like it's scary. Like, it's beginner, like, just your thought process. But eventually it was probably one of the best things that did come out of going to the gym, right? Was actually just entering the weight section. And the reason why I had like fear around entering the weights, is because I had no reinforcement. Like in my past, I had never gone into the weight section. So I had no reinforcement, whether it was good or bad, right? And it's just like everything else in life, right? Fear only exists from not having any reinforcement of whether you are good or bad or whether the activity is good or bad or whatnot, right? But it's like after I started going into the weight section and I began seeing reinforcement, which is like, all right, now I put on some muscle. My friends are coming with me, like I see these really cool people and they're all like, the vibes are there and just like everyone's there having great time. It's like, all right, I'm starting to get some reinforcement and like this thing that I'm doing is positive. But it's like fear only exists because you don't have reinforcement. So it's just like if you can just get the reinforcement as quickly as possible, you can minimize the fear component of it. Because then you're going to know it's like, all right, good thing, bad thing. And you have to be rational about it as well. Because like if there is something that you'll get like really bad negative reinforcement, because you just suck at it because you're new. And it's like, obviously like I sucked when I was lifting weights. I had no idea what I was doing. I think for the majority of my weightlifting period or just like time in the gym, the first like year or so was just spent doing cardio and abs because I knew not better. I didn't know any better. And then I started progressively like getting into weights and whatnot and understanding like just everything. Um, all in all to say is like after doing that, I got way more positive reinforcement. And I was like, all right, this is good behavior. Let me continue this because it is serving me towards my long term goals. And obviously it's going to suck, but it's like there are certain things that you just have to embrace the suck, as Alex Hermosi would say. You have to embrace it. Um, so yeah, here's another principle that was really, really interesting. The foundation of consistent action. So how I kind of interpreted this was I can give myself permission to overthink, but it cannot get in the way of my consistent action. So this is a really funny like way of just seeing it, but it's like you have to eat the frog. Um, you have to eat your vegetables before you can get your dessert. And at the same time, it's like I am making a condition to myself, which is like you can overthink. Like you can overthink for the rest of the day. The only thing is you can't let it interfere with your consistent action. So like for me, it's like, okay, I can overfear. I can like overthink and start fearing like creating content only after I create and post and edit a piece of content. And then it's like, then exactly like what am I fearing? So this was a really interesting like perception shift, which is like, all right, like I can overthink as much as I want after my consistent action is done with for the day. It's like now I've given myself permission to do what I was going to do regardless. But it's like now it's not getting in the way of the action. So you just make a conditional guarantee with yourself. Just like, cool, like you're guaranteed to be able to overthink as long as the action is done. It's like super. And then, action alleviates anxiety, and anxiety is just you having a lot of things to think long term about. At ultimately, like it doesn't serve you super well. So in the podcast that where I was watching with Naval and I think it was Chris Williamson, he talks about stress and anxiety, and he like breaks down stress really really easily. It's just like if you were on a construction site and there was a beam that was under stress, right? It's because it was bent in two opposite directions. So the beam was under stress, and your mind is kind of the same way, right? So it's like if you were under stress, it is because you were pulled in two opposing directions. So it's like I might be under stress because my friends want to go eat pizza, but I'm trying to lose weight, so I have to try and stick on my diet. And it's like that might cause a little bit of stress. And anxiety is kind of built on a lot of stressful decisions that were not made, right? So it's just like you have a lot of things that have been compiling on top of each other. It's like you have not taken the action on it. So it's like, okay, let's get that out of the way with. Let's start making the reinforcing decisions that will like ultimately reduce anxiety, but it's like action will alleviate anxiety. So it's just like do the thing that you're kind of avoiding, and you'll realize that like you shouldn't have been avoiding it because it wasn't that scary to begin with. Fear is fear is an inch deep and a mile wide. So yeah. And obviously, like in this video, I've referred to a lot of people like Alex Hermosi and Naval especially. But it's like these people are people that I look up to, people that I think are just like exceptional human beings. And I'm just like, I want to be like them. So that brings us to our last point, which is like, you want to have a mental board of advisors. These are kind of like people that you would go to when there's a decision in your life and you're just like, I have to try and make the right decision. So it's just like, it will just give you a lot of different mental frames in which to tackle the decision from that perhaps maybe you wouldn't have thought about. But it's like some of my like, mental board of advisors are like Alex Hermosi and Ali Abdaal and like Dan Coe, Jim Rohn, Naval, Charlie Munger. It's like these people I genuinely think are exceptional human beings. And I'm just like, oh my God, like, to be even a fraction of what they are in terms of just like their ability to rationalize and think, I'm just like, it's inspirational. And I'm just like, okay, I really hope to be able to stand on the shoulders of these giants one day and, to be able to provide something of value. But yeah, I mean, all of these things have really like just brought to my attention overthinking and not taking action. It should be avoided at all costs, but the biggest way that you avoid it is just you start seeing it a little bit differently. For me, I think the experiments are going to be a big one, and making a conditional guarantee to myself is like I can overthink only after the inputs for the day are done. And I think that that's probably one of the most rest assured ways of going to sleep, which is like, are all my inputs done for the day? Is my checklist like complete? And if you start seeing like your New Year's resolutions or your goals or like whatnot in an input only setting, which is kind of like what Alex Hormozy was saying, which was like impatient with inputs, patient with output. So it's like if you have anxiety or fear, or you're stressed about the future not being what, or like you don't have everything that you want already, then you can use your input or your action as your coping mechanism. And that will alleviate your anxiety, but also get you further in the direction that you're trying to head. But anyways, this was my little reflection or just like synthesis of what I've learned about overthinking today. And may this be, I'm not going to say the last time that this happens, but one of the last times that it prevents me from taking the action that will get me closer to my goals. So, yeah, that's that. Thank you.